Welcome to Forum 360 on Fusion, your PBS channel. Thank you for joining us for our global outlook with a local view. This is Leslie Ungar, your host today. Some children follow their parents into the family business. Usually, when we think of the family business, we think of following a parent into their profession, perhaps becoming a doctor or an attorney, a teacher, or a parent or parents that have a brick and mortar business. We don't often think of politics as the family business. For our guest today, that's exactly what she grew up in. Her father, Senator Vernon Sykes, is one of the longest serving members of the Ohio State Legislature, and her mother, Barbara Sykes, served 3 terms in the Ohio House from 2001 to 2006. At just 33 years old, Emilia Sykes is already serving her 3rd term in Columbus. She was selected by the Democratic caucus as the minority leader. She has been more than forthright in talking about some of the cons as well as the pros of being a young woman in what often appears to still be an older man's club. I don't know about you, but I take my hat off to anyone on either side of the aisle who enters any political arena, from school board to state position to a national position. It takes a lot of work, and we thank you. Please meet Emilia Sykes, currently serving as the minority leader in the Ohio House of Representatives, representing the 34th District. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Leslie.
Thank you for coming. Let's start with your personal story.
Sure.
Did you always know that you would get into politics, which apparently is your family business?
Well, to answer your question quickly, no. I never thought that I would get into politics. And our family business, I see it more as public service. We are, my parents both served on Akron City Council, as well as both of my parents served in the Ohio House, and now my dad is in the Senate, as you said earlier. But my sister, who is a public school teacher, and I, before I got here, worked for our county government. We've worked in public service basically all of our lives. And that's what our parents instilled in both of us, to make sure that when we had the opportunity to give back to our communities, that we did. And so we both have. And if you would have said to me 10 years ago, you are going to be the state representative, I would have told you absolutely not. My plan was always to be the principal dancer for the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater. And that's what I wanted to do. But unfortunately, life had some different, or maybe fortunately I should say, had a different plan for me. And I went into the public service business, and eventually I got a master's degree and a law degree, and wanted to work in public health. And so that's what I'm doing now, but doing it as a legislator. So it's been a wild ride, but a good ride, but definitely did not think I would be here.
Now, I'm interested, I grew up in a family business, but it was a brick and mortar business. And our discussions, about around the dinner table were always in some way about the family business. And, sometimes kids never want to go near what they grow up in, and sometimes, they're attracted to it. What were conversations at your dinner table like?
They were probably not much different than anyone else. We talked about the days that we had, how school was going, the weekend plans. So there really wasn't a lot of mystery there. But I can say often dinner conversations were interrupted due to phone calls, because constituents were calling the house or people dropping by with concerns. And I saw the lifestyle that it took and what you needed to be dedicated to the community. And it wasn't really something that I thought that I would be good at, knowing my personality and knowing what I wanted to do. I'm definitely a bit quieter, not as extroverted as most elected officials that you might see. So I figured I could work in the public sector without being the person out in front and leading the charge or leading these different issues. And so that's what I had planned to do. And so I was very comfortable in that until it became very obvious that there was going to be a seat open for state representative. And I was more than pushed by the urge and a very strong sense of responsibility to make sure that the community that had raised my sister and I had someone who was going to represent them, that cared about them and cared about their families and our community moving forward. And so for that reason, I decided to run for office, and I'm glad that I did, and I'm happy to give back, because it's always nice to see some of the folks who watched me grow up or my sister grow up and always remind me of some parade that we were in or some event that they saw us and how small we were and how we've grown up and how proud they are. And it's so heartwarming to know that I'm able to help them in their time of need, or even just to be a general voice for the community. So it's a real pleasure and really an honor, and I'm glad that I'm here.
Now, from my experience as a communication coach, and I get to work with people in different professions, I have this theory that every young person between the ages of 18 and 28 should go to law school. Okay, I don't care whether they graduate and whether they ever take the bar, but it seems to me that it teaches you how to think. How did going to law school figure into your plans?
So law school was, again, not really a part of my plans. It was just something that my dad suggested. He thought I'd be good at it. He thought it'd be a good opportunity to learn and a good way to learn how to think in a certain kind of way. And I was really drawn towards public health. And so the compromise that we had was I would do a joint degree program where I would go to law school and graduate school at the same time. It was very busy and a lot of hard work. But again, glad that I did it. Law school does provide a lot of opportunities and a way to look at the world a little bit differently. And that is something that I can appreciate now as I go through this job, and I'm trying to figure out what's important and what's not as important, and how to scan 2,000-page documents in just a couple of days or a couple of hours, depending on what our schedule's like. So I do appreciate the experience that law school gave me. It was a bit challenging because I did not intend to practice law. And so going into a school and a training program of sorts where you don't want to do the actual profession makes it a little bit challenging to find opportunities that fit in with what you want to do. But because I had that master's program, I was able to merge the two and get out what I needed to get so that I could learn and understand health policy and be a good advocate for it.
You know, I think that whether someone's really a doctor or a lawyer or a teacher's a little bit different because we were all students, so we saw what we think a teacher does, but we don't really see what so many professions really do on a daily basis. So for people outside of the state capitol, outside of Columbus, can you give us an idea of what does a state rep do on a daily or a weekly basis?
So that's one of the hardest questions that I always get. And it's hard because there's no such thing as what your day looks like or what your week looks like. So a week could look like committee meetings and perhaps session. And committee meetings is where we get the real policy work done. And we have people come in and testify for or against certain bills. And we hear what the impact of whatever proposal that we have in front of us, what it means for people in their daily lives. And it's a great opportunity, a great learning opportunity to understand what it's like for Ohioans across the state, not just those that we're used to in our community. So we could have committee for a couple hours, and then we'll go into session where all those bills that made it out of committee are on the floor and the entire body will vote on it. And there'll be some debate for and against amongst the members, not constituents or individuals who come in and testify. In between that, there are meetings galore between constituent meetings, folks who might be visiting from the district, or they could be meeting with agency directors or advocates or lobbyists who are all there to explain or tell us about what is happening in their world, in their field, or in their industry. And then when we're back at home in the district, the days could vary from doing a taping like this, or it could be a meetings with constituents in the district where we're talking about a specific community problem. It could be someone pitching an idea for a bill or a resolution or something like that. And then there's all types of festivals and parades and dinners and lots of community events which we go and support and make sure that people know that we're accessible and available to them. So a regular day, there's no such thing, but there's a lot of different things our days could look like, which makes this job really exciting.
Now, Ohio, I don't know, we used to be called a swing state. I'm not quite sure we still are a swing state, but regardless, state politics have been Republican for quite a while. You know, we hear at the congressional level, at the national congressional level, that it's difficult to be in the party that's not in power. So what does this mean at the state level to be a member of the House, but not the party that is in control?
So that's a challenge. I mean, obviously it is, because we have our ideas. We want to set our own agenda, but we know we don't have enough votes to do that. So there's a couple things that we can do. We can just be thoughtful and strategic about how we engage the majority party in discussions. There are some things that we will never agree on, and so that's okay. We just know that we won't agree on them, and as long as we approach the job.
Can you give us such as?
Sure. Abortion legislation, gun legislation, sometimes things related to the environment and climate change. Those just are places where we don't have a center point where we could eventually get to. You're just one side or the other. But when we talk about things like school funding, for example, or how do we reduce infant mortality, or what is the ways that we can encourage job growth in the community and getting people on good pathways, or the opioid epidemic. We can find a middle ground, and we've been able to find a middle ground. So part of what we do as members of the minority party is be thoughtful, be much more thoughtful, instead of throwing the grenades and the bombs, which people seem to be so used to seeing on the national levels. Particularly. We look for opportunities where we can be on the same page, and we use those very strategically. And so it's not all lost. We've had some very good wins. For example, I had a House bill last year, which was House Bill 1, and it was the priority piece of legislation, and it was the first time a Democrat has ever had that when a Republican-led House was in control, and the bill allowed victims of dating violence to obtain civil protection orders. That's a pretty nonpartisan issue, which we can all agree on, and because of the leadership at the time was willing to open the priority and allow for a good idea to come first and not who got the credit, we were able to make some moves and get that done. So we have those opportunities. But I still do believe Ohio is a swing state. If you look at the last election, for example, in state legislative races, there was a less than 1% difference between Republican and Democrat total votes. The reason why we are not a equal legislature is because of gerrymandering. The districts have been drawn to favor one political party over the other. So even though the vote totals come out equally, basically, because the districts have been drawn to favor one side, that is what our General Assembly looks like. And so I still would venture to say that we are very much a swing state, and you'll see Ohio continue to be in play because we do have a lot of different people, a lot of diverse voices. And then there's a little hometown nostalgia about Ohio that is also very much the story of America that people are interested in and need to be able to communicate to and with.
Now, what would you say are the top 3 issues of the state, and are those the same top 3 issues of your district?
So the state has a lot of issues, and the district has a lot of issues too. But primarily we're mostly concerned with making sure that we have an opportunity for folks to work in meaningful jobs and be paid well, or start their own businesses. So we want to make sure that there is an opportunity for people to make money so they can provide for themselves and their family. Some of the ways that we can do that is making sure that we have a good education system. And that's primary and secondary, that's early education, that's trade schools and higher education. And so that would be the second issue that we have to figure out. We have to get people some jobs, and then we have to train them for those jobs. The third thing that is important is also making sure that people are healthy. We talk about health care in a lot of different ways, and a lot of folks think health care is going to the doctor, or whether you can go to the doctor, and it is. But when we talk about health care, we have to start looking at it in a much broader and more expansive way. Because if you're not healthy, you're probably not going to school and getting the training that you can do to get to work. And so that's a very basic need that we need to fill out. And then it really becomes an economic issue as much as it is a personal issue and your capacity to be well or not be well. So between jobs, education, and healthcare, those are the biggest issues that we see facing the state. But of course, we have some issues around our taxes, funding things fairly in infrastructure, which I know a lot of people are very engaged in at this time of the year, as well as the opioid crisis, which continues to be a problem that we're really working hard to get our arms around. But again, that's partially part of our healthcare problem, and it's an extension of that. Locally and in the district, they pretty much remain the same, and you'll find that when you talk to legislators across the state, those tend to be the three pillars. And so if folks hear jobs, education, and healthcare over and over and over, that's just because those are the things that are just so challenging. But of course, taxes and construction and sewer rates can all be an issue, but some of those things aren't necessarily state legislator level issues. They are local issues, county or city. And then some of these other things become federal issues when we're talking about immigration and security in our military and things of that sort.
Today we are talking to one of the younger members of the Ohio House of Representatives, Emilia Sykes from the 34th, Akron, Ohio, and serving her third term. There are probably hundreds of state reps and state senators over the years that are fulfilling their civic duty at the state level with no agenda, higher than what they are doing. But I have to ask, a 33-year-old, now the minority leader, where do you see yourself in 10 years?
In 10 years, I want to be useful and helpful and somewhere making a difference. I have, like I said before, never thought that I would be a state representative. And although I am very glad that I've had this opportunity, I don't have my 10-year track to the governor's mansion planned out. But I do know that whatever I find myself in, I want to be helpful and useful to my community in a space that needs the skills that I have and can use the skills that I have for that right time and for that moment. So I am very open to what possibilities and opportunities lie in the future, but I don't have a specific plan mapped out for myself.
You have to have a different understanding and a different view of national politics and the individual players than we have that are outside of that arena. What would you want us to know about the national level and the players that we just don't understand or we just don't get?
So I think the national stage, there's so much more spotlight on them. And in the state level, there's not, which is a gift and a curse sometimes. One thing that we are fortunate to have in Ohio is a far less dysfunctional legislative body. And we have a lot hard time getting in in the airways to talk about what's important in Ohio because the national politics engulfs so much mental space and so much of the airwaves. Nationally, there's a lot at stake. I mean, there are trillions of dollars that we're talking about between our debt, between security, between how we connect with other countries in the world. And it seems like a really big deal. But one thing I always try to encourage people is to look a little bit closer to home. Because while the national level does provide a large framework and a lot of interesting personalities and people who have to connect to folks across the country, a lot of the impact happens in your state legislatures, and state legislatures don't often get a lot of attention, but there's a lot of things happening that are impacting people's daily lives. And so for as much as we can and as best as we can, we want people to engage with us and talk to us and not ignore what's happening at the federal level, but include us in the conversation as well, because the bill that someone passes at the national level usually is a framework that we have to take in the state legislature and make it fit for Ohio. And so when the implementation happens, it happens at the state level, or we put around the guardrail so that it can happen at the county level. And so when we miss the state level, we go straight from federal to city or federal to county, there's a big part in the middle that's been missed where people could have really made an impact.
I'm glad that you said Ohio is still a swing state. I'm glad that you said that. But if you could tell, either party what one thing they needed to do to get the state to swing to their side, what would that one thing be? That one issue, that one thing to say? How would you use your magic wand?
I would tell people to listen. Because what I would hear in my district might be different what I would hear in the 99th district up in Ashtabula, which might be different from the 44th in Toledo or the 33rd down in Cincinnati. And so if you don't listen to the people who live there or who are representing the folks who live there, you will never know. And so I know it's tempting to want to hear this one message. You got to say the one thing that's going to bring everybody together, but there isn't just one thing because there are millions of people in the state of Ohio.
One monolithic stage.
Absolutely. And so you'll find some common themes, and you'll feel those common themes as you start to talk about people, but it does take a lot of work to listen. And we have to spend some time and be willing to hear out what other folks are going to say.
So what three do you think are the best listeners in the Democratic field of 150 candidates? What three do you think are the best listeners?
I don't know yet. Honestly, I don't know. We haven't had any visitors come into Ohio just yet. We had one a couple weeks ago, but I'm not sure. And time will certainly tell, and we're hopeful that they do spend that time listening to what people need and what they want from a presidential candidate.
Now, you're one of the younger members at the State House. There are advantages and disadvantages, I'm sure. As I always say, there's always both. But you were involved in a situation at the State House where you had to go through more security than the traditional looking representative. Can you tell us about any follow-up that was not covered in that story?
Well, I think we were able to get generally good press around the story, but just some context, I've had a series of incidences in which I was trying to get into the State House and I've been searched, or my bag had to be searched before I was let in, which is not standard procedure or protocol for members or employees. We have a badge, and then the lapel pin that I'm currently wearing, all the members have one. So it's to designate us as employees and legislators, so we can bypass the security, yet and still I was still being subjected to that. In one particular incident, I was with a male colleague, and the state trooper who stopped me told me I did not look like a legislator, and that was the reason why he was going to search me that day, which of course is very embarrassing and discouraging, and makes you think about, what does a legislator look like? Why don't I look like a legislator? And so ultimately, from that, I filed all the complaints I could file with, the Highway Patrol, as well as the administrative agency that does this contract security in the House of Representatives, and I think there's one more person, and currently we are pending in the Ohio Civil Rights Commission a complaint based on race and gender discrimination in the security practices in entering these buildings, because quite frankly, the State House is the people's house, and people should be welcome and feel welcome in coming in and sharing their stories of who they are. And if someone who has the credentials to bypass security is having a hard time getting in, I can't imagine what it's like for someone who is their first time there or a little unsure of themselves and walking up to those gates, what's happening to them. And I had the ability, and knowing that I'm a legislator and I'm an attorney, and I am empowered enough in myself to go out and complain and file complaints about it, but what's happening to other folks? And so that was a big issue. And then the other one was challenging what the face of leadership looks like. It doesn't have to look like a middle-aged white male. It could be a young black female. And people should want and encourage these faces like mine, faces like yours, so that we don't have a one type of person leading the state of Ohio when we have this diversity of thought and ideas. We need different kinds of people in the legislature. And so from there, I've been talking about this issue. I haven't been shy about it. We are still waiting on a result from those complaints, and hopefully it will come out favorably, and at least an opportunity for us to acknowledge what's happening.
Thanks for the update. In the couple minutes we have remaining, it has gone by so quickly, you had the opportunity to go to Israel. What is one thing that surprised you, or that you think would surprise someone that's never been to Israel?
How safe it felt. I think that was one of the concerns at least my family had when I was going.
Every family has, yes.
What are you going to do, and how are you going to be safe, and how are you going to secure yourself? And there was not a single time when I was there when I thought that my life was in danger at any point of any type of negative harm. And so it's almost sad to say that was the one thing that surprised me, and I hope that we can get beyond that, and people see Israel for the beautiful country that it is, and so much of it that it has to offer, especially in the world of technology and innovation, which is what we were there for, was a mission trip, a business mission trip. And so I learned a lot, and I was really grateful for the opportunity to go, and look forward to going back.
I have to ask you your favorite food while you were there?
Oh my goodness. I can't pick just one. There were so
that
many.
Tells you a lot about the food,
definitely.
right?
I was well fed in Israel.
That's good. So I have to ask, growing up in Akron, are you a Skyway or Swenson's girl?
I am a mustard seed girl.
You're a, oh, wow. I didn't see that one coming.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm a healthy girl.
I try to be. I'm working on it more and more.
whether you're in Ohio and it's to people that are in different places in Ohio, or whether you're talking to people from outside of Ohio, what is one of the best things, in a sentence, what is one of the best things about Northeast Ohio?
It is just a beautiful place to be. We have wonderful people. We have a lot of opportunities to enjoy yourselves, to set your roots down here and have a good life. And so I think it's similar to your question you asked me about Israel. What would you be surprised about? And sort of everything. It is much more than meets the eye. And all you have to do is show up, spend a little time, get you a local tour guide, and you'll fall in love with it just like all of us have.
Are you volunteering to be anyone's local tour guide?
Absolutely. I'd be happy to.
Okay. What would surprise us, and my last question for you, if you can answer in a sentence, what would surprise us about the average state lawmaker, if there isn't any such thing as an average state lawmaker, a person who commits to being in the House? In a sentence, what would surprise us about your cohorts?
That we're all there to work for our constituents, and we really do want to do a good job. The way we do it is a little bit different, but we all care about our communities and our constituents.
Thank you for that. Teddy Roosevelt was the 26th president and the youngest to ever be president of the United States. The following is a brief edit from one of his most famous quotes. The credit belongs to the man or woman, I add, who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly. Our guest today, Emilia Sykes, is one of those warriors. She is in the arena, unlike many of us who just comment on the arena. She strives valiantly in her third term in the Ohio House of Representatives, probably marred by dust and sweat, figuratively if not literally, at times. For those of us who pay attention to politics, it is encouraging to see someone like Emilia in the arena. Wherever her career takes her, she'll always be a Buckeye, and she'll always have been the girl from Akron. Thank you to our guest and for joining us on Forum 360. I'm Leslie Ungar with your Global Outlook with a Local View.
Forum 360 is brought to you by John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, the Akron Community Foundation, Hudson Community Television, the Rubber City Radio Group, Shaw Jewish Community Center of Akron, Blue Green, Electric Impulse Communications, and Forum 360 supporters.